while I'm a fan of doing things yourself on investing and other things when you can, I don't think an expat plan is one that you can do alone.
No, absolutely not, because there are so many things that people, even though we're not doing things for other countries and we're not doing the finances in other countries, we at least know the questions to ask and say, hey, you need to talk to somebody about this and get these things in place, just because we've seen a ton of it and we've done a ton of it. And banking, for one thing, that's a question that comes up all the time is, okay, can you even have your bank account anymore? Will they accept it if you're in another country? What about your investment accounts? Can you keep them where they are? Do you have to move them? All these things that, well, it might seem like, oh yeah, I've got this money, I can go do this. It's not always that simple. It might be a little bit more tricky, and you have to go through, consider what complications may arise from leaving the United States. Welcome to the Child Free Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bree and Dr. J, certified financial planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
So 2025 might be the year of people planning to move outside the US. Like, it sounds a little dramatic, but it's true. Like, I don't know how many clients and people I've met with are like, I don't know if I'm really going to leave the US, but I kind of want to have a plan. And then there's some folks that are like, I want out. And really the question is, how does that impact your life, your finances, and kind of like this expat life of like, I used to be in the US, but now I want to go. And Bree, have you seen folks asking like, where do they, how do I get out?
Yeah, I think it's more strange for me to come across a client who doesn't ask that question at this point than it is for a client to ask about becoming an expat.
And what's your favorite country you've heard so far?
My favorite country? I don't know if I have a favorite, but I hear a lot of European countries all the time.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of the European countries. I don't know necessarily like it's like the number one answer. I mean, for a while, Portugal was a big one, kind of is. But like, I don't know, I get random ones. I want to go to Germany, or I had one the other way, Scotland, or random things. I've also had folks going to Costa Rica. I mean, like Canada, a little bit of everywhere. And I think the challenge is each country's got its own weirdness.
Yeah, it's so true. And there's so many different countries that it can be really hard because you need to look into what every country's weirdness is.
Yeah, and let's be real. For those that don't like where the US is going, I get you. But there's no guarantee that somewhere else is better.
That's the hard part, is you don't know. You really don't know what is going to be better. And I know we've had multiple conversations about that is, okay, leave, but then is that a better place?
And is it better for the long run? Like, is it better today? Like how the politics is going to impact? Like, I don't know. But I think what I do like is having choices. So having the financial independence where you can be like, yeah, if I'm not happy with whatever, I have an exit plan.
Yes. Having that exit plan, I found for a lot of people is just comforting to know that they do have options and they can go ahead and pick up and leave when and if they would like to. But not having that option can be really tricky too for the people who want to leave but can't.
And in full transparency, you got to have some money to have an exit plan. I'm just going to call that out. We can call it privilege, you can call it whatever you want. I call it financial independence. It's the ability to say, you know what? I'm out. like I've had enough. I'm going to go do a couple of years somewhere else. I'm going to see what life is like. That is privilege. But if you're in debt, you have no emergency fund, this exit plan stuff is just not a reality check for you.
Yeah, that's so true. It's expensive to get across to other countries. And while it might not be expensive in the other countries, I was looking at things. Back in 2020, before COVID hit, I had applied for a job outside of the country just because I wanted to go live somewhere else. Because I just like the culture and experience of other places. And I've since looked at multiple times of different airlines to transport my dog. I am very, very anti putting my dog under in cargo. That will not happen ever, ever, ever in my life. Buy a ticket and take my dog across the ocean. I think it was $10,000 when I looked.
Yeah, transporting pets is an issue. And like the ideal, by the way, is actually that's where private jets come in. Like you can charter a jet to bring your pets. And the like vet stuff of it is actually relatively simple for most countries. You know, you got to do the vaccines and all that and get a wellness check. And there might be a quarantine process or something like that. But it's possible. But it does make things harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, private jet's an option. There are more and more airlines now that are specific. They are like private, pet friendly, transportation only, going out of different places in the area. I think personally, my feelings are if you don't have a pet, it makes it a lot easier. Or if you have either a small dog or a cat or something like that, those tend to be a little bit easier than my dog is 60 pounds and kind of hectic on a plane, just going under. Probably won't work out so well.
Yeah, we have a Mastiff. So can you imagine, you know, me and the Mastiff taking up our own row on the plane? Because that's really what it would take.
Yeah.
Like,
your dog is very chill, though. He's so chill. Yeah.
You might be right, but I'm not. He's never been on a plane, so I have no clue.
Yes, that is true. Lily in normal mode is crazy.
Well, I mean, we all may need some meds by the time we're done, and you know, just a little something to chill us off and call the flight. So, all right, let's take a step back. So, the first question is, where do you want to move? And there's a whole bunch of things to go into this. I try to encourage people to figure out their life first, then their finances. But this is one that might be a little different. So, there are a lot of countries a whole lot cheaper than the US. We actually did an exercise for a client and looked at what does it cost to live in a random island in the South Pacific. Actually, it was Tuvalu, which Tuvalu's number one export is the .tv domain name. And it was relatively cheap. I mean, like you could live there, all expenses, housing, healthcare, your life for probably less than 25 grand a year. So, I mean, really cheap. But you know, you've got you might have some creature comforts that you're used to that are not there. So you have to find this balance between what you want your life to be and what's real. The first thing I encourage people to do is see if you have any option for citizenship by heritage or some similar program. So I'll give you our example. My wife has family from Poland. Actually, it was relatively simple to apply. So we sent paperwork. Her mother actually is a Polish citizen. So we sent the paperwork in, said, here's a copy of mom's paperwork. I think it was like $1,800 for the lawyer to do all the paperwork. And it's probably about an 18-month process. And we're in the process. We sent the paperwork in, I don't know, probably 6 months ago. But for $1,800, that's really cheap. And it gets you an EU citizenship. Now, little technicality on that. It gets my wife a Polish citizenship. And I'm the spouse of an EU citizen. But from a paperwork standpoint, it all works out the same. Because the issue is, you know, citizenship goes along with can you work? Can you earn money? You know, it's different than I'm on a visitor's visa for a period of time. You know, there are things you have to do for citizenship. By pure luck, this one on heritage, it's pretty simple. Like, you're like, yep, I have parents. This is what they are. This is our marriage certificate. It all gets translated to Polish, but that's what the lawyer is for. But that's not always available. I mean, the citizenship by heritage is the easy path. And it usually goes up to kind of grandparents, occasionally great-grandparents. But we've seen countries just this week when we're recording this, Italy said, yep, we're changing all the rules. So some countries are very good about it, some are not.
Hey, Child Free Wealth listeners, it's Bree. I highly encourage you to schedule a Child Free Wealth checkup. During this time, you're going to get a couple of forms to fill out that include your life and financial plan. We'll review them, and then we're going to have a meeting and go through them with you. We're going to give you some advice and things to work on and talk through things to make your finances simpler so your life can be amazing. You can schedule yours by going to our website, childfreewealth.com, and clicking the Schedule Now button. Yeah, it can be hard because that can be the first step. And then in my case, I am like one generation away from being able to get EU citizenship by heritage. What a bummer there for me.
Yeah, I looked at it for myself, and my family comes from Lithuania, and my great grandfather left like 5 years or 4 years before Lithuania was reformed because it was like part of all different countries over the time. And they're like, yeah, you missed it by a couple of years. I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? Like, it's interesting. It's at least worth looking at. And in couples, I've had some pretty good luck where one of the two can get it and then the other person can kind of come along with it.
Yeah, it works great. I'm multiple couples we've seen where one of them can get it, and I've got friends where one of them can get it, and so then the spouse has gotten it. That's a fantastic way to go about it. But what happens when you can't get it?
Yeah. So if you've listened to the podcast, you've probably seen Andy and Libby, and they were talking about moving. And actually, in the end, they ended up going to France. And France is a really interesting option because in France, you can either go in kind of like as if you're retired or go in as a digital nomad. And digital nomad visas have become very, very popular. France, don't quote me exactly, but it's something like $50,000 a year of income. If you work remotely, you can get in, or a similar amount of retirement income. But you have to pick a path. The path you're on says, oh, like, am I going to earn income or not in that country? And it's kind of weird. Technically, and by the way, there's a whole lot of technicalities around this laws, and talk to your CPAs and talk to your attorneys about this. Technically, if you're visiting a country for travel, you're not supposed to be doing work. Now, in this digital world, let's be real. I check my email wherever I go, but what they're really asking is about like, who gets to like take money in my taxes? And as a US citizen, you're taxed on your worldwide earnings. And these countries would love you to come in as a digital nomad because you're bringing income into their country. And it was a relatively simple process for France because they were able to do it either under the retirement or under the nomad. And if you look at countries across the world, you're going to find quite a few starting to do digital nomad visas. Now, you're going to need some paperwork. If you're going to do it based on retirement, chances are they're going to want somebody like a CFP or a CPA to kind of write a letter and go, yep, you've got enough income coming in and prove it. There's some tricks around how you can prove that income. If you really need to, you can use things like annuities, so you have a guaranteed income. If you're collecting Social Security, that can count. Pensions can count. The retirement visas are really a simple way to get in and not extra cost. There's always like some filing fees or some legal fee, but it's not a big lift.
Yeah. Part of that is just knowing where do you want to go and then looking at the rules, because if you pick a random country, type in the rules, you can probably find a way to get there and that you qualify for, even if you don't have citizenship. It's just about knowing what to look for. And also, frankly, like we said earlier, having the money to do that.
Yeah, and a great site called Nomad Capitalist, and we'll link to it. It's got some great resources. There's a bunch of these kind of like nomad expat things. Now, be careful. Some of them want a lot of money to help you through the process. Let's just call that out. You're going to pay some lawyer something. You're going to pay a tax person something, and you're probably going to want to work with a financial planner. Now, there's like some technicalities around this. As a financial planner, I can only advise you on your US stuff. And then we find a CPA who understands your combo. Because the issue is, I have CPAs that know like US Mexico or US Portugal. But if you decide to go to Hungary, like, we're back to the drawing board. Like, I don't know that answer. And it's a specialty for each combo. If you have 3 countries in it, forget it. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to find you something specific for that. Like, I've tried, like, I'm not going to be able to do that. But you need to understand what are the tax trees, what are the citizenship, all that, before you make a financial plan, before you make a life plan. And as you start looking at countries, if you're willing to be a little bit more kind of broad, so we leave the EU, there's some pretty reasonable things. So I'll use the example from Costa Rica because I've been doing work there. Costa Rica, you can buy in to a property. I think it's like 155,000, something like that. Don't quote me. You got to look at their website because it changes every day. That's not actually too hard to buy into like a condo or something. They also have a renter visa where like you rent usually for 3 years and you can get citizenship. They also have one by for the retirement, one also for kind of nomad. there's different ways to do it. Realistically, it's relatively cheap. On the flip side, you hear a lot of folks talk about kind of the golden visas, and Portugal is one of the popular ones for that. And Portugal's tried to change the rules on this like 4 times in the past 3 years. Like I've got clients working through it, and I don't know, like depending on the day they're offering it or not, because there's a lot of politics around it because it brings in outside people. If you're going to go kind of the golden visa, buy your way in, actually Malta might be a cheaper way to get into the EU, but it depends week by week on where you're going to go. But if you're going to buy in, it's kind of like a $300,000 to $500,000 investment in that country to do that. The problem is I can't really judge investments in those other countries. First of all, we got some legalese around it. But second of all, like the documentation is not always great on this, where like with clients, I'll often get to a point, I'm like, you know what? You're spending $300,000 on that investment. Consider it a purchase price for your visa. If you make money on it, great. If you don't, just consider it the cost of the visa, which really makes it not an investment.
Yeah. And I think if you're going to go through that process, you need to start it early. Another big thing, we're talking about lawyers, CPAs here. Something I've seen recently is we're recording this on April 4th. So a few days before tax time, but people will want to make these changes and then say, hey, I can't find a tax person to help me. Obviously, we got like 2 weeks until tax filing. Before you make any of these moves, you need to be talking to the CPA, lawyer, financial planner, and you need to have them in your back pocket and be paying them to have access to them. Because if you're trying to make these moves and you make the leap, you move, and then all of a sudden here comes tax time and you're trying to find somebody, you're not going to find somebody. Let's think ahead, long-term plan.
We're really talking about if you're going to go on this expat or you're just going to make a plan, it's probably 6 to 12 months before you'll be able to execute it. I'm just being transparent on that. Unless you happen to be a citizen from the other country and all that, cool. You want to be deliberate about this because U.S. citizens, you're taxed on your worldwide earnings, and how you do this may make a mess. So let me give you an example of this. If you've been saving a lot of money into Roth contributions, so that now is not taxable in the U.S. in retirement, it may be taxable in retirement in the other country you go to. So you're like, oh, I have this money that's tax-free. Not when you make that move. That's a rude awakening for some folks because you may have a whole plan based around that. And all of a sudden that's not an option because there's these tax treaties in between countries. And by the way, I am not an international tax expert. I know enough to go call this tax person and I'll get on the phone with you and we'll have the conversation. Like, because it's each country has its own weirdness and you have to figure it out. There actually is a way in the US to pay what's called an exit tax. You pay up everything you owe, you give up your citizenship, you're out. That actually might be a good option for some folks, but it's really an option for folks that have very little gain left over in their taxes. So for example, you had your family, something happened and they gave you a whole bunch of money and it was gifted to you. Well, if something was just gifted to you, you don't have a lot of gain. Well, that's actually a good case for you pay exit tax and get out because that you don't have gain to get taxed. Now, by the way, once again, CPA, like professional, all that. But if you've been in the US for most of your life and now you got, 20 years of gain hanging around your taxes, yeah, the exit tax probably not the right answer because now we got to move to another country's tax. Like what we're not doing is like trying to do like these super things like I'm offshoring my money and hiding it in a Swiss bank account. No. We're not doing that because the issue is you go to another country and you screw up your taxes there, you may lose your citizenship. So like you gave up your U.S. citizenship, lost your citizenship. Like now we're in that no man's land. Oh, that's a mess. You also have to look at how are we going to plan for long-term care and how are we going to plan for Medicare, Medicaid. Socialized medicine in some countries is better. In some countries, it's not. I had somebody who in her 60s, she's in Portugal. She's done the whole buy-in, but she's planning on moving back to the U.S. for her long-term health care because it's better. Now, I'm not saying it is better or not, but for her, that's her opinion. I had somebody else, if I go back to that Costa Rica example, we just looked at long-term care there, and it's going to cost about $60,000 a year for a really nice care facility. And
It's not bad.
that's like half price. Like,
Yeah, that's good.
I'm like, I'm kind of liking this option, and they were like, this is a nice place. And I'm like, nice place. All right. You have to think about these things. And while I'm a fan of doing things yourself on investing and other things when you can, I don't think an expat plan is one that you can do alone.
Hey, Child Free Wealth listeners, it's Bree. If you haven't already signed up for our newsletter, be sure to get on it, where each week we send out information regarding what's going on in the world of child-free life and finances. You can sign up by finding the link in our description. No, absolutely not, because there are so many things that people, even though we're not doing things for other countries and we're not doing the finances in other countries, we at least know the questions to ask and say, hey, you need to talk to somebody about this and get these things in place, just because we've seen a ton of it and we've done a ton of it. And banking, for one thing, that's a question that comes up all the time is, okay, can you even have your bank account anymore? Will they accept it if you're in another country? What about your investment accounts? Can you keep them where they are? Do you have to move them? All these things that, well, it might seem like, oh yeah, I've got this money, I can go do this. It's not always that simple. It might be a little bit more tricky, and you have to go through and figure out, do you need to have an address in the US, and where does it have to be? And will they even allow you to log in? I saw somebody recently who, it wasn't necessarily them, but they said, hey, my power of attorney is this person, and they're located in this country. I said, yeah, that's a great idea and thought. But if they ever need to get into your bank accounts or anything like that, it might not work because they're in another country. So consider what complications may arise from leaving the United States.
Yeah. And I'm becoming a fan of kind of like the expat, not expat life. This is going to sound a little weird, but just go with me for a second. It's kind of more nomad, where you maintain a U.S. residency. And by the way, it could be a small apartment, just a studio, one room, whatever it is. Maintain a legal residency, and then you go travel a lot of countries. Because in general, it's kind of like 6 months is where you start triggering these other things. So maybe I don't stay in a country for more than 6 months. I go to France for just under 6 months, and then I go to Poland for just under 6 months, and I go to Portugal. Like, that's not a bad way to do it, because then you get out of some of this tax issue and some of the citizenship stuff. And particularly, it's a good option for folks that are in states where there's no income tax. Now, if you're not in a state with no income tax, you got to move your residency. It's a little bit more work. I'm looking at this like, I'm going to get in a boat and travel the world. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to maintain my U.S. residency. I'm going to maintain an apartment here in Tennessee where it's no income tax, and just kind of pay my bills out of there. And then what you can do is you can pay a power of attorney, a trustee, or something like that to manage your stuff. We have a new product coming out, Child Free Legacy, that's actually going to answer that for child-free people. Stay tuned, because that might be an option to say, you know what? I'm going to be in another country. You manage it for me. I just need some money in a bank account. Simple finance is amazing life. Simple finances, I get on my boat, travel the world, or I'm backpacking across whatever. I like it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that fits you. I got a bunch of boat idea names for you if you need a new boat name, by the way. I just did a boat tour, and I thought of you.
The how you pick the boat name, that's a whole separate discussion. And, like, it's your identity, and, do you do like the joking names? My last boat was called Think Two Healthy Incomes, No Kids. There's lots of different things. My wife's favorite is actually calling it Research Lab. So when you can say I'm out at the research lab, yeah, we'll see. Where I'm going is you can figure out a way to exit that kind of gets you half out, but still maintains things and doesn't mess up your finances.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's important. But I want to talk about something else too with leaving is, what about friends and family and societal cultures? Because you can have this great plan, you can have the ideas, you can go and you can leave, and you can get there and realize that you don't have those people anymore. And that can be difficult. And should you stay there? Should you come back? That's a whole nother question. But going out, making those friends and seeing those people and building those connections, it can be incredibly important.
Yeah. And it's up to you what that community looks like. Sometimes folks are good about making new community. Sometimes the community travels with you. I'm in the boating world, and there's actually a bunch of boat owners. The company of boat I want is Nordhaven, and they get together and they, kind of have a little bit of community. They actually call it a noodle when a whole bunch of Nordhavens hang out together. Like it's a gathering. Too many boats come together, I guess that makes a lasagna. I don't know, but like there are ways to make community work for you. It could be online, it could be other things, but it's about what's important. I think we all kind of know what community we want to not be in. Like, and this year's kind of taught us that. But what do you want to be in? What does that look like for you? Whether it's, whatever that means to you, and how do you do that? And for some people, the new cultures, the new communities are like part of the reason they're doing it. But you're right, Bree. It's also kind of like, what are you giving up?
Exactly. And even knowing your community is important. Your idea of community is my idea of hell, and my idea of community is your idea of hell. So knowing that and being aware of that is important. Like, I need people. I need to be out and I need to be around people all the time. I also need my time alone. But man, there are days where I will leave the house to work just because I need another human around me. I don't care if I'm talking to them. I just need somebody.
I'm laughing because I have an event tonight. It's a social event for entrepreneurs down in downtown Nashville. And I'm like dreading it because, I've got to meet all these random new people in this place I don't know. And Bree's like, that's a lot of fun. Like, and that is the case. I think the hard part is a lot of people, when they're working on exit plans or being the expat life, they're like really kind of, a lot of people right now are because they're scared. There's things going on. Like, there's just a lot of emotions. But then that question, is the grass really greener? Which, this is why I like kind of a nomad plan where you can like choose to come back. We're not pulling the whole citizenship. My wife and I, we're going to get the citizenship. We're probably not going to use it right now, but we've got a backup plan. And I think that's the balancing act for you. This is that question of what life do you want to live? And then how do we get your finances to get there? And this is one I encourage you to reach out to somebody to help. We're happy to do that. I may not know the country combo you're talking about. Like, we get a lot of weird ones. I'm like, all right, I have not thought about that one. We'll help you kind of put your head around it. And if the answer is sometimes we'll go, yeah, we're going to refer you out to somebody. That's fine. I will give you some transparency. I've got one guy that I know in the UK that specifically serves child-free folks. In most of the other countries, I haven't heard much of people serving child-free people. You're going to have to find a way to find that balance for yourself. But you do need to put a plan in place.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Please let us know your thoughts wherever comments are available, or email us at media@childfreewealth.com. To stay up to date, find and follow Child Free Wealth on social media. If you're interested in working with us, learn more by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.